Chapter 9. Thinking, I would be stuck in Chiayi forever. Adrenaline shot through my veins. It was followed shortly by anger at Blake for not mentioning it, which was quickly overridden by guilt for even blaming him. I was the one who had insisted I could take care of myself. I set my shoulders and told myself I would be fine. I repeated, "I can handle this," over and over in my head. After a minute, I started feeling maybe I could. There was a bus station right next to the train station, so I went there, hoping someone could point me in the right direction. A man met me outside the bus station and asked,
Alishan?
I shook my head. Guanziling, I said, probably butchering the pronunciation. He started speaking Chinese, but he pointed to the road and gestured to the right-facing road in front of the train station. I thanked him and headed that way. When I got to the corner, I studied the map in my guidebook. Soon, I was at the bus station. My chest expanded in much the same way it had when I finished walking the fitness trail. I found the bus station. I felt like dancing. The sign of locations and when buses left was long. I couldn't make heads or tails with the characters and numbers.
Where are you going?
I jumped and turned to see a man in a bus uniform grinning at me. Opening my guidebook, I pointed to the word Guanziling. The man nodded.
Bus leaves at 9 o'clock.
I glanced at the clock on the wall. That meant I only had 5 minutes to wait. I paid for the fare, and he gestured to follow him, and he led me to another man.
This driver of bus.
The man told the bus driver where I was headed. At least I heard the word Guanziling mentioned. The bus driver beckoned for me to follow him onto the bus. He took my ticket and tore the corner off. I sat right behind the driver, confident he would make sure I got to the correct place. About 20 minutes into the bus ride, I saw a sign for Guanziling. I rose from my seat, but the bus driver caught my eye in his mirror and shook his head. Relax, Alia. He knows where you want to go. He'll make sure you get off at the right time. It was hard trusting a man who didn't speak the same language as I did. I looked around for Agent Collins, but he wasn't on the bus. He was probably somewhere close, following along in a rented car. No one besides Grace, Luke, and the FBI knew I was here anyway. There was no reason to be nervous. My breathing came in shallow gasps, but I forced my breathing to slow. This was the moment for me to show I could handle the independence I had insisted I needed. If I did get lost, I could call Blake. The man stopped to pick up more passengers, and Agent Collins got on. The way he could get around amazed me. I was sure he found a different stop to be sure we weren't connected. After climbing steep roads for a while, the bus turned into a parking lot in a small town. The driver gestured this was my stop. He stopped me before I got off and showed me a list of times. It dawned on me he was showing me the times buses would be going back to Chiayi. I thanked him to let him know I understood. I tried to ignore Agent Collins as he climbed off the bus behind me. The trees in the park next to the parking lot were tall, with branches hanging limply in the cool, damp air. I pulled my arms further in the sleeves of my sweatshirt and headed into the streets of Guanziling. A few minutes later, I found someone sitting in front of a shop peeling some sort of fruit. I opened my guidebook and pointed at Firewater Cave. "Do you know where this is?" She shook her head and made a gesture that she didn't understand me. I stepped closer to put my guidebook under her nose, but she pushed my hand away, saying something and shaking her head. Tears formed and I willed myself not to cry. I'd have to call Blake already. A young couple approached before I could get my phone out.
"Can I help?"
the young woman asked. I sighed, the tension in my back melting through my body before it exited into the cement under my feet. "I want to get to the Firewater Cave."
Oh, it is long way. You probably should take bus.
Where do I find a bus? I asked. She told me about another place to catch a bus to the cave. She smiled as we parted.
It is up main road.
She pointed to the road I had walked from the park. Thank you. I let out a long breath. Jishi, I repeated in Chinese.
Bye-bye,
she said, in the way I had heard many Taiwanese people say. Bye-bye, I returned and waved. I stared out the window as the bus wound its way on the mountain roads. A light mist with clouds covering the ground gave the hills and mountains around me a mystical appearance. The bus stopped, and the driver made eye contact with me and pointed to a sign that said Fire Water Cave under the Chinese characters. I climbed off. Cement stairs right in front of the bus stop led the way through an opening in a long cement wall. I hurried up the steps, excited to see the cave. People congregating around a little pond caught my attention. I almost laughed when I looked past them and saw flames climbing the rock wall behind the pond. There must have been some mistake in translation, because I saw fire and water, but not any kind of cave. Flames of fire started up and extinguished randomly. Bigger flames with a constant glow skirted up the side of the cliff. The swelling in my chest came back. It expanded until tears wet my eyes. I had made it here. The attraction left a little to be desired, but I could take care of myself. I noticed a man step from the crowd and make his way toward a wall. He was noticeably not Taiwanese. He removed his hat, and our eyes met. Agent Collins. He gave a slight nod, then looked away, feigning interest in the dragon mosaic on the wall beside him. Disappointment crept up my chest. I hadn't seen him on the bus up here. I knew Agent Collins's presence was necessary, but I wished I was truly alone. The caves didn't take long to see. I would have to find something else to do while in Chiayi. I walked confidently to the bus stop. Guanziling, I asked when I stepped onto the next bus that stopped. The driver nodded, and I got on and paid him. I got to the park right at 12:30 and saw the bus pull in. On the way back to Chiayi, I scanned my guidebook for anything I might want to visit. A description of a ceramics museum jumped from the page at me. After getting off the bus, I followed the map in the guidebook until I found the museum. There was a pond with lily pads, and I walked towards it. I found a little bench and sat down to rest for a bit. I had already done more walking than I was used to, though I felt stronger than when I hiked up to the big Buddha with Anthony and Emma. My eyelids closed and I focused on relaxing each part of my body, starting with my feet. My relaxation technique was to my arms when I heard someone speaking Chinese behind me, almost in my ear. I jerked my head around and found myself almost face to face with a scrawny Taiwanese man. I jumped and scooted away on the bench. He repeated whatever he had said. I was slightly distracted by his yellow-stained teeth. He was missing a few. I shook my head, my heart still pounding at his closeness. I don't speak Chinese. He stopped for a minute. He stared at me, looking awfully confused. Then he spoke again. I wished Blake were with me as I repeated myself. I'm sorry, I don't speak Chinese. He cocked his head and stared for a minute, and then he started pacing. He started speaking again, only this time he was speaking louder. I cringed as his closeness enveloped me, making it hard to breathe. The man was not giving up, so I pushed to my feet. I'm sorry, I don't speak Chinese. Then, before he had a chance to say something else, I hurried from the pond to the museum. Before I went in, I looked back at the bench. The man was sitting where I had been. I shrugged, my heart rate slowing, and my breathing steadied. Maybe that was his bench. I caught sight of Agent Collins leaning against the far corner of the museum, texting and looking remarkably like he belonged there, white skin and all. The museum was mostly deserted. I passed an older couple on my way into the second room. I wandered in and out of several connecting rooms in the ceramics museum. The silence weighed on me, and I thought I should probably leave. It wasn't safe for me to be alone, but the next room I entered stole my breath, and my fears slipped away to simmer in my unconsciousness. In the center, there were drawings on how to make porcelain-type figures and their clothing. Surrounding the edges of the room were 3-foot-tall figures, bringing those drawings to life. They were in different poses, and most had on stunning ancient Chinese garb. The details on the faces of the porcelain figures were intricate and made the figures lifelike. The clothing was varied in color from black to light blue, to red to yellow. Most of the clothing had long, wide flowing sleeves and had many layers. Some were in warrior-type clothing, and the figures each had some sort of headdress as well. Some wore hats, some wore crowns. The artist in me could stay in this room forever. I examined the tiny details painted on their faces. It was all so wonderful.